am attempting to use modern technology, but do have paper here, just in case it all goes horribly wrong. So thank you all so much for joining us for this session this afternoon, first after lunch, so well done. I want to take the opportunity to make sure that we introduce ourselves. So we have Will, Karen and Darea on the panel. So we'll just take a moment to let you know a little bit about us and the areas of the business that we cover. So I'm the Director of Internal Communications and Culture for Warner Brothers. And on the side, I'm a board director for the Institute of Internal Communications. So I'm here today to facilitate the panel.
Hi, I'm Will Bushell. There was a picture of me up there without a moustache. I'm growing one for Movember, so you might not recognize me from up there. I'm marketing director for Garnier skincare at L'Oreal, but my side project is that I'm the business sponsor for mental health for L'Oreal UK and Ireland. So it's my job to raise the awareness and put mental health onto the agenda for internal stakeholders, both from all of our employees, but right up to the senior people at L'Oreal. So my remit covers all UK employees, which is 3,800 people in the UK and Ireland. And it's a massive passion point for me, because in my experience, mental health issues have far greater an impact for myself, my family and my friends than physical illnesses.
I'm Karen Baxter. I am a lawyer by profession. I'm a partner in the law firm Silkin, specialising in employment law. My role and why I'm here today, so I sit on our board and I am the lead sponsor of our Displaced Minds campaign, which is all about mental well-being and mental health. In terms of the firm, we're a sort of medium-sized law firm, so much smaller than L'Oreal. We've got around 350 employees, 50-odd partners, primarily UK-based across 4 UK offices, but we're also in Hong Kong.
And my name's Darea Flanagan, and I'm the WellbeingEngagement Manager, so it's my day job to be here, so I'm a bit more responsible and have some accountability with that. But internal comms forms a big part of that. So E.ON, energy provider of solutions and energy, 10,000 people about in the UK. We are a global business, but my remit is in the UK. And today it's for me to go through about some of the campaigns that we've run. We've got an in-house occupational health service, so I form part of that, and about how we get that cut through within our business when there's so many messages.
Great, thank you everyone. So I think there are a ton of things that we can cover around internal communications when it comes to mental health. We're going to focus on 3 key areas. So the first being around wording, so thinking about how we refer to mental health, how we connect and engage with our colleagues in those key messages, so really that wording piece. Also focusing on imagery and symbolism as well. So many of us don't want to see that very traditional stock imagery of the man at the desk with his suit on, with his head in his hands. We want to be seeing something that's a bit more representative of how we are feeling. And then on branding, the other area that we're going to cover, how we communicate and develop the focus on mental health, and how we engage people by linking this to the company brand or the values that people should already be quite engaged with. So what we will do is we're going to share some of the case studies from these guys to give you a bit of a flavour of some of the things that they've been doing. Obviously, throughout, please feel free to ask us any questions. We'll dive into some of those a bit later on. But firstly, we are going to hear from Will on what they've been doing at L'Oreal, particularly around their health campaign, mental health campaign there.
Yes, so as I said at the start, mental health is such an important issue for everyone, and I think at L'Oreal we've got a reputation for having a very fast-paced environment with areas and times of big pressure. So I think we've got a responsibility as a company to really support our employees, and at the same time we found that although it's a very, very important subject, people are almost afraid to talk about it at work. So our whole campaign was about, first of all, helping people with the support they need to access helplines, support with their own peers, but also just to raise awareness of the issue and get people to talk about a very, very important subject. So we've been working on a massive program over the last 2 years. We started from probably quite a low base, but we're really ramping up and accelerating very quickly. There's three things that we've done to really try and support our employees. Firstly, we've trained 23 mental health ambassadors who are peers across functions, across divisions, across different seniorities, so that people have confidential people that they can talk to. We've also introduced an employee assistant helpline to get people 24/7 access to help and support. And we've introduced an occupational health service to help people with mental health.
So just for a point to make, we have some slides, but we have no clicker. So if anyone has a clicker and they could pop it to us, that would be wonderful, please.
Yes. So I'll fill while we wait. But the project was about kind of really launching these access points for people with a manifesto that shows that we are taking this issue very seriously, and there are a lot of support tools for them to access. So what we did was we created a think tank with our ambassadors and other people that found mental health a really important subject, and we co-created a manifesto which should come up on screen in a second. And because I've worked 10 years in marketing at LOreal, next one please, I was able to kind of ring in some favors from some of our agencies, and we had not very much budget, so this was quite important. So we created this with people using wording, branding, visualizations that people are very aware of within L'Oreal. So everyone that works at L'Oreal has been asked, are you worth it, at some point in their career? So we use this as the focal point of our manifesto for this campaign, because you're worth it. Another little L'Orealism that we use, or that we hear a lot, is don't panic, it's only shampoo. So we integrated that into our manifesto as well. So this was something that people were really a part of, and they felt like they created it themselves. And so when we launched it, there was huge engagement from our employees. So we put these posters up in areas of safe haven around the office, where people go to in times of stress. So we put them in toilets, we put them in by the printing facilities, we put them in meeting rooms for 2 people, so that when people were feeling stressed, they went somewhere and there was this poster that they could then access the tools. The other thing I think is that it's something really important that it's not just one campaign, it's something that's sustainable throughout the business. And so we kept these posters up, and these are still up in our office. We've got email footers that everyone of the mental health ambassadors has on their email, so that there's a continued access point for people to get this information. We also shared it on our social media networks. So our LinkedIn account has 2 million followers, and that was put out on our global account. And we also shared it on our HR's Instagram, which has a reach of about 6,000. And we had super high engagement. So we had over 500 likes, 200 shares, and it was something that employees were actively sharing on their personal Instagram accounts because they felt so connected to the campaign. So overall, we were really, really happy with the project, but we also have some results that have shown that it's really working. So our employee assistant helpline, before campaign to post-campaign, the uptake has doubled. So it's having a real, genuine impact that we can measure, and it's great that we're really able to help our employees with access to the help that they really need.
Fantastic. Thank you. So a few of the key points there to sort of think about, really around sustainability of any campaign that you have. So making sure it's not gimmicky, it's not one-off, it's something that runs throughout the whole year. Thinking about linking it to the company brand and the company values, fresh use of contemporary imagery that you would have seen there as well. And also the bit that I found really, really interesting is really being considerate about where you position any of your internal communications. I know someone mentioned in a presentation earlier about Lou Media, but seriously, and with something like this, that is somewhere that people go as a safe space where they need time away from their desk, and that may be where people are considering where they might need help and what their next steps might be. So thank you for sharing that. So we are going to move on to Karen to talk about the campaign at Silkin and what you've been doing there.
So Silkin is clearly not a kind of massive branding organisation with a huge load of contacts that we could pull in to help us develop our imagery and the materials that we were using. We started the campaign on a 0 budget. I'm really pleased to say that through the work we've been doing, I've been able to persuade our FD that budget for this kind of thing is a good idea. But we started off with just a lot of keen amateurs around a table trying to come up with what were we going to do, how are we going to explain it. We were very clear about our mission. Our mission was basically to enable people to talk about their mental well-being and their mental health at work, and to know that they would be met by support, compassion and understanding. That was our aim. So we decided that we would come up with a name for the campaign. This was an exercise in a lot of people sitting around a table, coming up with ideas, then discovering that pretty much every idea we'd had already been taken by some other organisation, and going back to the drawing board and trying again. There's a fantastic website called Name Checker where you can go through and put all your ideas in, and eventually we found one that we both liked and could use. And This Place Minds was that, which it was all about getting people to understand that we care. We care about your mental well-being and your mental health, which actually in and of itself is quite an unusual thing for a law firm to be saying. But it's so important. We sell the minds of our lawyers, and if you don't look after those minds, it's like owning a bookshop and leaving the books out in the rain overnight. It was so important for us, and so there was a lot of understanding and buy-in. I literally found the one guy in my team who knew how to work a computer, who made the logo. That's what you see on the screen there, the head, and it's the kaleidoscope of colours from our corporate logo. When we came to launch, we wanted to make sure that there was visible leadership, and that was so important for us. We couldn't just say, we care about this, but not demonstrate it. So the first job for me was to get some of my fellow partners to talk about their own mental health. And I was really helped by that, by the fact that one of our very, very senior leaders had sought some sponsorship to help his daughter, who was suffering from anorexia. So I asked him if he would be prepared to speak about how that had impacted him and his family at our partner conference, which he gallantly agreed to do. And it was in the space of the sort of 3 or 4 minutes that he spoke for, you saw the room turn from, there's a real attitude amongst my peers of, this doesn't apply to us, and get other people. And suddenly people sitting there thinking, oh my goodness, it really does apply to us. And the statistics don't just apply to us. They apply to us even worse. The legal profession is dreadful when it comes to stats on depression in particular. So we were able to use that as an opportunity to make a plea to the rest of the partners, will you write a blog? And about 6 partners came forward and wrote a blog about their personal experience of dealing with mental illness, which enabled us to launch in a really powerful way by saying, this isn't us telling you you can be open about your health. We're going to be open about our experiences. Telling stories, sharing experience is so important. The top right of the screen, you can see a still from a little video that we produced. Again, done in-house on an iPad, where we just had a load of people from around the business, all different levels, different offices, just looking into the camera and saying the name of one mental illness. It didn't necessarily have anything to do with them, but it was just trying to start the conversation. And then we launched on Time to Talk Day with the video, with the logo, and with the first of the blogs, which we then, we did a different blog every day for that week. Really rewarding for me was that I then started to be approached by some of our more junior colleagues to say, can I write a blog? I've got experience. And about another 10 or so colleagues came forward and wrote their own blogs. And I'm not ashamed to say I've sat sobbing at my desk reading some of these. They're so powerful. And there was a real trust. One of our lawyers said to me that she had written a blog about the multiple suicides her family had been affected by. And she had never told the story before. Not one of her colleagues knew. I didn't know. I'd worked with her for years. Did not know this had happened in her life. It was just extraordinary. And she just said, I wondered about whether I should do it, but I knew it was safe. I knew no one was going to pity me and I'd be okay, which was exactly what we wanted. We had a poster campaign. We also had lots of statements by people who were involved in the leadership of the campaign, talking about how much they cared about it and how much they bought in. The posters that you can see on the screen, they are from Mental Health Awareness Week, where we did a different activity every day, really trying to raise awareness about what people could do for their own mental well-being, trying to normalise taking care of your mental well-being. So we love a pun. It may not be obvious, but these are both puns. So Lewis Silkin we call LS, so LS gets physical. Nice 80s song reference for anyone old enough to get it.
And did you come up with these ideas, or did you get other people to...
Within our little campaign team, we would come up with these. Equally, Mind Over Matters, so that was all about the mindfulness activities that we were doing that week. We call each case a matter, hence Mind Over Matters. And it was getting loads of people involved, really low budget, really low key. We had a choir, we had, I pushed the trolley round handing out healthy smoothies, we had a nutritionist come in, and then we got our canteen to cook what the nutritionist was advising as good mood food. And it's just been very, very rewarding, but echoing what Will says about putting the posters up in the places where people go to, the coffee points, the loos, those sorts of places, and using our intranet. But it was certainly anything but a high-cost, flashy campaign, but it still seems to have done the job.
That's great. And I think a couple of things that you mentioned, the linking it to the business so people connect with it, so the LS gets physical, linking it to what they do as a business with the matters, really thinking about that kind of thing while you're putting together your internal comms campaign. Also the timing, you launched a time to talk, so thinking about what can you sort of, especially if you haven't got a big internal comms team or a brand team or whatever that might be, being able to sort of jump on the coattails of something else that's happening externally, where you can share that message that might be relevant to your message as well. I think that's really, really useful. And then the piece around getting the leadership team involved and getting employees involved as well. One thing you really need to do is know your employees already. So making sure that you are spending time out there getting to know who people are so that you can then find and source these stories about these employees that you might be able to bring into the work that you're doing as part of your campaign as well. So thank you. And then, Darea, we're going to move on to you and hear about yours as well.
Yep. So I was tempted to just put up a slide that just had a one-man band up there because, there have been, we're 10 years in our journey now, and I've sat in conferences like this over the last 10 years. And, when you're the wellbeing manager, you don't wake up one day and go to the careers fair and ask to be that. You kind of find your way there. And I've worked in facilities before. I came from IT. Before I worked in safety and joined the health side of things. So you do have to become a one-man band sometimes with this. And internal comms may not be your specialism, but it's absolutely at the heart of it. So outside of work, I always love a prop. So inside of work, I will always love a prop. So I've brought a couple of things with me at the danger of falling over or dropping things. But, things like this make really big differences. It may only be 2 little pebbles with smiley faces, but it became the face of our campaign. It wasn't a huge strategic thought about that. We don't have a brand agency involved. We are a well-oiled machine. We have huge brand agencies. We do marketing externally. We do marketing globally. But me and my 2 little pebbles can hold their own sometimes within that. So I think that the message is about hope. And you don't have to be an expert in these things to really drive things and make a difference in your organisation. So I was trying to think about what was the key things, because it's okay for me to be in year 10 now and start doing a 10-year celebration. We're one of the first companies, the first 10 actually, to sign the Time to Change organisational pledge before it was a thing. So we're number 6 in that. So that was 10 years ago come next year. And in the beginning, we probably didn't do some of the things that I'm going to say for you guys to do. So we've learned through experience. But the kind of things I was trying to think of is around strategy. It's so important to align it to your company strategy, whatever that is. And we all know that changes every year. There's a new buzzword, there's a new strategy, there's a new direction, there's a new transformation. So keeping up with that is so important. So the kind of key stakeholder management around that, so that's two-way, you knowing what's coming up and them understanding what that is. So having that clear strategy might seem a little bit boring, and sometimes that has to be data-led and that has to be really business-focused. But it keeps what you've got to say on the radar, because if you can be smart enough to make it fit their agenda, then they're more likely to take it as part of, not a bolt-on, but as part of what that core activity is. So we've got something new now called E.ON Life, which has its own branding and its own purpose and everything, but we've been able to wheedle ourselves into that, so we've become the new core part of that. So you just have to be a little bit cheeky with that as well and change what you've got to do that. And it has to be measurable. You know, we've heard a lot here today around return on investment or value on investment, which seems to be the new kind of buzzword. Measurement isn't easy, and monitoring value, but people are at the heart of this. So the value, so if you make the difference to one person, it may not be measurable, but it's really valuable. So the challenge is, how do you do that? We make sure it's on the board report. We absolutely, every month there is something to do with wellbeing, and we've got 3 key pillars, and wellbeing and change this year now is key on there. So being able to check that and making it visible absolutely makes my job a lot easier. So we measure things which we think are valuable to the business and will help different parts of the business listen. We've got 13 parts of the business, so it's not easy. We don't have one person to talk to. We have 6 directors, 13 parts of the business, 30 sites, people out in vans, all kinds of things. So it means something different to everybody. But the impact is amazing. And I think if you can make it a core value, it becomes more sustainable. So you're not having to change things. You're not having to pedal harder. You're not having to come up with some different campaign every year. It becomes really entrenched and embedded in what you do. And it becomes more meaningful then. It's almost cultural change, and I know that you can talk about cultural change programs, and we absolutely have a team. I'm a team of 1, but our cultural change people are a team of 40. You know, yet what we talk about from the wellbeing element with 2 Little Pebbles absolutely smashes out of the ballpark what those guys are talking about day to day. So if you've got that really good engagement, people notice what you're doing, and we're putting things at the heart of that. And so I think it's what is the impact in individuals, but what is the organisational wellbeing? And we are absolutely on our journey now from changing, from talking about resilience in individuals, which is no less important, but we're there, to making organisational impact and wellbeing part of the conversation. So when changes and transformation happen, talking about people is the most important step in that. So we have a programme called Treating Customers Fairly, but now we're looking at treating colleagues fairly. So if it's in the agenda, then it gets thought about a lot more. And it's really important to listen, not just to create something where you're talking. So we've invited lots of people to talk, and the more you invite people to talk, the more they will, and the more you have to listen to them. For World Mental Health Day this year, the topic was suicide, and I was a little bit reluctant to run that. But we sent a newsletter out asking for personal stories. We run lots of personal stories. They come and go all the time. We don't have to manage them centrally. But we had 17 colleagues come just for one day to talk about their experiences of suicide, which was amazing.
And it's interesting, I've heard that quite a lot. A lot of companies, including Warner Brothers, actually had concerns about starting that conversation around suicide. Did you guys have any of those issues that came up?
Definitely. When we looked at what we were going to do for World Mental Health Day, and obviously the big theme was suicide, we knew that at least 2 colleagues had been impacted by suicides in their families in that previous year, and there was a huge nervousness to say anything. And to be honest, we ended up rowing back quite considerably on what we were planning to do, to end up just really linking to information about the worldwide campaign and not really doing much more internally.
Yeah.
Which I think is an opportunity missed to a degree. But
Yeah.
And I think that what we did is that although we were nervous, we kind of went out there, and when 17 people came back, we were like, this is something that people are going to talk about. It will upset some people. We've got good things involved to help people out. So one of the guys that works in one of our outlaying offices did a 40-second video, because the hashtag for that day was hashtag 40 seconds. And he posted internally and with LinkedIn on his account. And there were 2,000 views on LinkedIn just from his one 40-second video. You know, internally we had about 20,000 hits, likes, comments, views, which is, it puts us in the top 3 news parts globally. So we know that our part in the UK absolutely is playing part to that. And I think that's where we're seeing the benefit of engagement now. So although it's taken us a long time to embed this, that passion that we absolutely have for well-being and resiliency is shining through now. And it's more than having a comms plan. We can sometimes fall into that trap of spending hours looking for a comms plan and then trying to put a date and who the key audience are and going along that. And sometimes the road is rockier than that. So I think it's more about how do you make it an engagement plan, not a comms plan. And those are the kind of things where we use props. So our 2 little pebbles created a ripple effect. And we used it as a time to talk event. So we started with some people in a room, and a board member telling personal stories, but now we're doing it where we're decorating pebbles, and we've done, as simple as it seems, about 800 pebbles this year so far, and that's been 800 people who are sharing their story in our organisation, from having a partner section, to children on drugs, to debt, to suicide, you know, juggling a working parent. So we've brought in new policies along the way, all because of 2 pebbles and this building pebbles and drawing. And now we've built something up about positivity postcards as well. So we've taken some of the pictures of other people's pebbles, put our branding on, because you can only imagine what a global organisation, their brand guidelines look like. So we've had to brand it properly. But once you know all those things, it really helps with that internal comms. And I think looking externally now, you know, we've probably got our external media people tweeting now already.
And if
trying to
you
bring that to customers.
have mentioned that internal, external, making sure that they're aligned, who have you worked with? Have you worked with your corp comms team, your brand team, your marketing team in the external? And how have you worked together?
Ours was actually quite tricky, because the "Because You're Worth It" tagline is not a L'Oreal UKI tagline, it's a L'Oreal Paris tagline. So we have 36 brands at L'Oreal worldwide, and that's just one of the brands. So we had to go and really schmooze the general manager a bit to let us actually take that brand line and use it in an internal comms. But we also had to align with very senior stakeholders to kind of allow us to take over the whole building with this campaign during Mental Health Awareness Week. And I think there's also a question up there around toilets and branding in toilets, which is quite interesting. So there's some questions coming up that people aren't allowed to do their posters in toilets and things like that. We actually had quite a challenge to get that through ourselves, because apparently toilet space is like gold dust and gets booked up months and months before. But it was really, really important to, you know, when there's a time during the year which is about mental health, and you need to be talking about mental health, you have to just push your agenda, and you have to go above people's heads, and you have to go and make sure that when it is the right time, that you are everywhere for that message to be going out. And toilets sound silly, but are very, very important, because that's where people go when they're most vulnerable, when they're feeling most stressed, when they're feeling most isolated. I can really resonate with that. As, you know, I go, if I'm really, really stressed and really upset, I want to get out of the way of everyone that works in the business that can see me, and go in the toilet and just breathe for a minute. And so that place in the building is like gold dust, I guess. It's a great place to really talk to people when they're feeling a big struggle in their life.
And I think where there's a will, there's a way, because for us, toilet space is a premium. So this year, what I decided to do when I was told no is ask for forgiveness, not permission. So, so we went for vinyl stickers instead, and we put them on the mirrors. So the posters were booked, and we couldn't get them. So I thought, you know what, I'm not going to listen to this. So we just got some the vinyls, and I had a quiet word with facilities who were a bit reluctant, but we did it anyway. And so we put the stickers up, and I think our next step is we never had internal champions. So our new thing around wellbeing warriors will mean that And this is where the engagement plays a part, because we had 150 people in the last 10 days who have applied to be wellbeing warriors, and we never expected that whatsoever. And these are the people that hopefully, with a little bit of passion like us, is that they'll be able to bring some of this more to life in more of our places. It's okay for me to ask for forgiveness because of, you know, my position in the organisation. But for those guys, that's going to be a little bit harder. So we've got to work about how we do that. But, you know, these kind of having props and things become viral. We talk a lot externally about things going viral, and we spend probably more time on social media looking at things that are going viral than you're seeing, you know, even in radio now or telly, there's red buttons and there's so much more engagement. And that's where we're going a lot. So people like little Fred at the front, you know, our little gnome, you know, he had 500 followers within 2 weeks on our internal communications. That's unheard of. And we tried to get on the agenda at the Leadership Council, and nobody would let us get on the agenda that year. So in the end, we just photo-bombed with the CEO, and then somebody else said, I want my picture took, and then they were tweeting internally. Yeah. And then all of a sudden, Fred became the Winter Health campaign, but then he talked about... Fred's dead now, by the way, I'm afraid. But, you know, I brought him back here for today. But, you know, those kind of things we were able to play a little bit around with. And you can see the words that I spoke about, strategy and measurable and impact. You know, we had these little speech bubble, words on it, and they spell smile. And those are the kind of things that you have to do when you're doing this. You have to smile through things. You have to smile because you're helping people. So actually campaigns can take viral lives of their own if you get them right.
And thinking about things like using tweeting or external or posters, one of the questions that that's come out is, what do you believe is the best communications channel for mental health communications? Would you have any opinions on that?
Well, I think it's going to depend on your workforce. We have a workforce who are probably 90-odd% desk-based, so something computer-based makes sense. But we do a bi-weekly staff feedback, which is great, so we're able to get very, very up-to-date feedback. But definitely one of the things we got was a response saying, you're making me stressed with all these emails. Yeah. And so we tried to listen and at least mix it up and just try and use, we have a Yammer feed, we have the intranet, the posters, emails, and trying to minimize email traffic, but at the same time, not apologizing for sending things that we felt were important messages that people needed to hear.
Yeah, well,
social media worked really well for us, but I guess it depends on the type of employee base that you have. But I think it was a mixture of people being engaged with, they felt a kind of ownership of the content that we were putting out there. So then when we put it out onto our social channels, people were then proud to share it with their friends, with their families. And I think that, for me, was the most powerful, was how it managed to go from something that we created with them to something that then they were happy to share with their peers.
Yeah. And I think one thing that I've done in a previous company is when we did launch our focus on mental health, it took a while to get to that point, but our CEO actually spoke about it at the town hall. So you have your leadership team being very vocal about being supportive of campaigns and focus on mental health. So utilising those moments when you have employees in a room together, when you have a chance for them to talk about it afterwards, I think is a really great communications channel. And another one that I know that you used at Silkin was video, and hearing people's stories and the reality of the impact of situations people have been in, that either they're going through themselves or that they have people that they know are going through. Just hearing that storytelling element, which is very often done so well via film, much harder if you're writing it down in an email and you're getting people to look at it on an intranet site. So using video well. I'm trying to think if there's any other... Oh, how do you reach employees who are home-based?
Hands up, we got that wrong first time. We had lots and lots planned for people who were office-based, thinking, right, we've got to make sure we cover every office, and we were obsessed with trying to make sure. And then we forgot. We have a pocket of people who are home workers, and we missed them out, and they told us we missed them out. So first thing we did was say, sorry, we missed you out, and then making sure that the next time we planned and accommodated them. We are, professional lawyers and business support people. We're not professional comms and kind of wellbeing campaigners, but we're learning as we go, and that's a big part of it. And actually, that's a big part of all of this, is being human and letting humans make mistakes. I think that's a big part of actually accommodating wellbeing. But yes, so what we did was, when we did our next round of Time to Talk, we contacted all the home workers. We were inviting them. I think we gave them all some silly amount of money, like £5 to go to a coffee shop, have a coffee, go and get out, go for a walk. And we encouraged all our home workers to call each other that day to talk to one another and make sure they had a proper conversation with somebody. Yeah. But it's difficult. It is difficult.
Now, this is a great question, and one that I would always be thinking about is, all very well, you're launching a great internal communications campaign around mental health, but what if you don't have the support culture programs in place to back any of that up? So what did you guys do before you launched your campaigns to make sure that that element was in place before you made any promises to the business? Will, do you want to cover that?
Yeah, so I think, as I said at the start, we started from quite a small base, but I think the one thing that I think resonates throughout our campaign is about co-creation and using your employees. So if you don't have lots of support panels in place, create think tanks, get the people that are really passionate about this subject into a room and craft it out with them. And because in that way, you firstly work out what the majority of the company want, but you also come up with some great ideas that you probably wouldn't come up with yourself if you just sit in silos. So I think it's definitely about kind of like getting everyone to help out and come up with those ideas together. Even if you don't have a lot of money to kind of put a lot of support behind them, I think you can come up with the ideas to then invest in the right areas.
And I think if you're thinking about things like engaging with leadership and engaging with the HR team, so making sure that you have the training and development in place and already in the works, or already happened, and those conversations have already started before you do anything that's making promises to the business or claiming that you're something that you're not quite there yet. Or it is thinking about how you talk about, like, this is where we want to be, but we need to work with you to make sure that we get there. So we want to hear from you to make this, the best culture it can be to support you. So there's various ways, and I think it totally depends on the business you're in. But I think you absolutely have to have that backing in place before you even start thinking about putting any kind of campaign together.
And it can be small steps, can't it? It doesn't have to be that you've got a full-on campaign and you have to go straight in there and deliver it 100%. I think small steps means that you're turning over stones and seeing opportunities and starting to get in. We've got an internal recognition campaign, like a postcard that goes electronically called Buzz. So if somebody does something nice or helps you out or even does a great job, you can send that digitally. So we just asked if we could put a mental health one in there. So it doesn't always have to feel separate. It can sometimes, you can sometimes build things into what already exists, which makes them much more sustainable then.
And one of the questions that's come up here is around being mindful of unconscious bias when doing marketing or branding campaigns. So how did you make decisions on what images that you would use in your campaign? Karen, do you have anything?
I guess that was one thing where we did have an advantage, that there were a lot of employment lawyers who were sitting on the on the kind of campaign group. So that was very much front and centre of our minds. We wanted to make sure that everything we used had a variety of faces, of different levels of seniority, different gender mix, different racial mix. That's very. We're very conscious of those kinds of elements of bias. But definitely one of the things that I did was, so I got lots of very senior people to write little kind of campaign backing statements. I will confess I edited them, because there were some things where I just thought that language is a little bit clumsy, or a little bit, you could slightly send the wrong message. So just always making sure that you have a second person look at things and look at it from a different angle and think, could you take that the wrong way or the right way, but and not be afraid to edit that
view.
And I think that's why personal stories work so well, because that comes from the person, so they can't be biased. There can't be any unconscious bias in that, because it's their personal story and it's not right or wrong. And that's why, you know, because we can, if you're only doing one or two maybe, but, you know, for us, we do multiples of those. And back to our two little pebbles, you know, there is no gender there is no age, there's no race, there's no religion, and it really does become the face. You know, back to that smile, it just becomes the face of our campaign.
So sadly, we're about to run out of time, but I just wanted to do a really quick wrap-up of some of the key points to maybe take away. Obviously, we're kind of knocking around the rest of this afternoon if anyone wants to grab us to ask us any questions. And I feel like there's so much more we could go into, but we just really wanted to focus on those key areas. So, you know, the firstly is creating something sustainable that isn't just a one-off, because people face poor mental health every single day. Just doing a wellness week once a year is not good enough, quite frankly. You have to be doing something sustainable throughout the whole year. Second, making sure you map out your stakeholders. So get to know your people. One-size-fits-all approach doesn't generally work, and you need to make sure that you're communicating to everybody. Third point, particularly making sure with the informing and educating that you are informing and educating your leaders and managers so that they are supported to have two-way conversations. They need to be, you know, in that position before you launch any kind of mental health campaign. The piece around human stories, which we've heard today, really painting a picture. There's really nothing more powerful than hearing about your colleagues and their stories and people who are close to you or that you are more senior than you even, that you're quite surprised to hear about. Linking to the company brand and the values people should connect with already, so make use of those values. Try and avoid that really negative imagery, really think about the imagery you're using. And I think a key point that's come up in the conversation we've had and earlier today is making sure that you have legal and facilities on side to get anything done. So that's it from us. Thank you to the panel, and thank you everyone for listening.